Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining today's highly anticipated webinar, Introduction to Business Intelligence Dashboards in Kyriba. We'll start off by covering a few logistics. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. Feel free to submit your questions through the chat function console at any time during the webinar. We'll do our best to address these questions at the end of the session. For any technical issues, please dial the number listed on the slide. For those that cannot see the slide, the GoToWebinar support number is 1-888-259-8414. The recording of today's session will be posted to Kyriba Social along with the slides. And with that, we're going to turn over to our speakers, Bob Stark and Greg Person.
Thank you, Gretchen. And Greg, happy Friday to you.
Thank you, Bob. Happy Friday to you.
It is a happy Friday, really. So today we're going to go through a very happy topic, I think a fun one for most people, and that's going to be the idea of business intelligence. So what we're going to do for today, a pretty simple agenda. We're actually not going to spend a tremendous amount of time. I mean, obviously, if you have a lot of questions at the end, we will answer all of them. But the intent really is to go through a very simple and easy agenda. And number one is to really talk about what is business intelligence, distinguishing the existing reporting in Kyriba, which is still going to exist, versus business intelligence, which is a complement to that. So we're going to talk about those two different topics and just really what they are, what they mean, how you can understand when do I use business intelligence, when is the existing reporting within Kyriba the best choice. So we'll try and do hopefully a good job of distinguishing those for you. And then part two, talk about specifically what we built in Kyriba. And that's going to lead very nicely into the demonstration where Greg's going to give you a run through of exactly how this works, what it looks like. You will, I promise you all, be dazzled and impressed, not just because it's Greg demoing, although that is an honor for all of us, but more to the point, it actually is really fun to play with and look at, and I think you're going to appreciate some of the things that it brings to the table. So basically with that, let's kind of get into it so that we can spend as much time seeing the product as possible, as well as answering your questions. And just to reiterate what Gretchen offered at the very intro of this presentation, ask your questions at any point. Just use the chat function. It won't disrupt us, I promise. So if you think, oh, I have a question, just type it in when you think of it. Don't save it for later and then you forget about it, sort of thing. So we want to make sure that lots of people have questions. I did a few user groups last week in New York and Chicago. I did one in Detroit as well, and people had lots of questions on this particular area for the simple reason that there is lots of interesting things around not just what they look like, but the use and how it actually will be rolled out. So we'll make sure we address all of those things. But to start with, let's talk about today's reporting. Now, I know many of you think, okay, I don't like today's reports. They're difficult. You have to do lots of filtering. You have to really know what you're looking for. And in fairness, those things are kind of true. It is very rows and columns of data. It's really not really meant for, but it kind of requires a manual analysis. Like your eyes have to scan the numbers, scan the rows, scan the columns. And sometimes if you have a lot of information compressed, certainly the screenshot I put in the bottom of the two here is a good example of there's a lot of information in a description. It can sometimes take away from what exactly am I looking for here. There's really no drill down. These are static reports. Whether you're looking at them in PDF or even just looking at a report that's on screen, for the most part, unless it's something like cash position worksheet, you're not really going to get that drill down ability. There certainly is not really any change in the fly, especially with the static reports, the ones that are produced. And in many cases, I put this bottom point, like if there's questions, let's just say you're submitting that to the treasurer or the CFO, those questions typically require explanations. They will say, what's this, what's that? And you pretty much need to be around or be available by email to answer those questions. There's not a lot of ability to come to conclusions or to drill around or really to use the report to uncover exceptions or trends or analysis. So I've kind of set it up with that, saying here's the limitations of existing reporting. As Greg likes to mention, sometimes it's really, you have to know what you're filtering for, and you have to put those filters in place in order to get the report to tell you what you're looking for. Now, to contradict that, or at least provide a different angle, we offer business intelligence. And yes, this is a screenshot. It's foreshadowing. You will see something and more like this in the actual demonstration. But the idea is that number one, it's visual. A lot of people in the industry will call it sometimes business intelligence, like we're calling it, but sometimes it's called data visualization for the obvious reason that you look at something like this and it's not rows and columns of information, it's graphs. I mean, you have a picture of the world map here with colors, which is fun, but also useful because as you'll see in the live part, you can look at, in this case, looks like Canada is causing a bit of a problem, me being Canadian, that's sad to see, but nonetheless, you can see that, wait a second, I want to find out what's going on here. So the color coding gives you just another level of information within just the ability to drill down on a world map. So simply if you drill down on Canada, you are suddenly isolating the companies or the bank accounts or the cash flows, but depending on the information you're looking for, you're able to isolate those and find out exactly what's going on, in this case, say on year-over-year forecasts. So the visualization, but also the multiple drill downs really is meaningful and very different than what we're used to in the idea of reports that we run today. The other things that I think are going to be very interesting to all of you is the fact it's immediate update. It's going to run a lot quicker, especially for larger volumes of information. This type of tool and the way we've constructed it is meant to actually look at tremendous amounts of information. If you think of running a report in the system right now, and let's just say you want to run a report, maybe it's got 100,000 records. So maybe you're looking at some historical transactions as well over a couple, maybe months for some people or years for others. But let's just say it's quite a few records. You're going to find that report might take a few seconds or more to run. This is designed to run instantly. And it's the construction, the architecture, all of that is a little bit different. We'll say the guts of it are a little bit different to make that possible, but you're going to find that more instantaneous ability to run reports. And also the last bullet point, you'll be able to change those things on the fly. You can build these dashboards from scratch. You can update them yourself. And I can attest to this. Greg is a superstar at demonstrations, so I think we all acknowledge that. I'm not going to put myself in that same category. I'm not super good at it. I can play around. I could do this quite easily as well. And so that's maybe the benchmark, that's the bar. If Bob can do it, anyone can do it. And I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but not totally. The reason why is because we want to make this something easy for you to use as the user. We don't want you to have to come to us to build a new dashboard. I mean, we will help, of course. In fact, there's partners that are also being enabled with this. So there's lots of people that can help do these things, but we wanted a tool, and this was the biggest thing that we wanted to accomplish. We wanted a tool that you could do it yourself. And I think that's for many of you that want to do reports, you think, oh, I just want to do something a little bit different, or the CFO is asking me to do this instead of that. How do I make that happen? You're going to have the power to make that happen. It's really not that difficult to do. So I know that's a big promise, but I promise you as we get into the demo, you're going to see through Greg that actually it's not that difficult to play with, and it's pretty dynamic, and you can make some very interesting things. So the idea of business intelligence, Kyriba, I know is very high level glossy bullet points, and yes, it's another screenshot just to tantalize you, but really we believe the future of technology, it's very visual, it's very analytical, it's very meant to crunch numbers and find trends and analyze. And as a result, this is the kind of tool that the system needed. So it's very dashboard oriented instead of rows and columns. It really is focused on extracting rather than just having to scan information, scan rows and columns. And it does suit itself well for things like KPIs and performance, not just how many bank accounts do I have, but what is my cash exposed to would be more of a performance metric. That's the kind of things that we do in a system like this. So to get a bit more technical before I turn it over to Greg, let's talk a little bit about what exactly the difference is in terms of specifics and details that I know most of you are very interested in. So number one, in terms of Kyriba reports, typically it's the treasury team. It's you as the user that are leveraging these reports, running these reports. You may show them to other people, but realistically you're running them for yourself. And then you may have some other level of analysis needs to be run. Some clients dump those into spreadsheets and make things like graphs and tables and other sorts of stuff that can present the information the way that management wants to see it. The BI, on the other side, you're going to find that these dashboards, the visualization, the way you can get to information, the flexibility to do things on the fly actually lends itself so that you can actually give this to your treasurer and your CFO, and you're going to find that it is in the format the way they want to see it, perhaps a way they weren't even thinking they wanted to see it. So it actually means a little bit less work for you to prepare that treasurer or CFO report. So that's kind of helpful. The data sources, so obviously Kyriba reports, they're run basically Kyriba data. It's Kyriba only is why we said it there. With the BI solution, although initially it's going to be focused on Kyriba data, the possibility of this tool is to actually bring in external data. So the capability is there. What we need to do is standardize that for you to make it easy, so you're not trying to think, how will I bring this in and suddenly have 8 bazillion different spreadsheets to try and bring in external data. We will manage that for you and help you through that, so it's easy. But the capability is you can start marrying information that's within Kyriba, but also things that aren't in Kyriba. And that's a capability we'll be able to help you with over time. But the first iteration is going to be Kyriba only data. In terms of data freshness, if you're wondering what that means, it's basically Kyriba reports, like you have something that comes in the cash position right now, you get the bank download right now. Guess where that's going to be? It's going to be in your Kyriba report. It's immediate, it's automatic. With the BI solution, initially, and this won't be the strategy forever, but initially we want to make sure that we're maintaining the performance of the system. So initially we're going to focus on prior day, meaning that say it's an overnight refresh, and then you're going to have all the data from, maybe it's overnight or maybe it's from the prior day cutoff or something like that. We'll work with you to figure out what that timing is going to be ideally, but let's just say overnight for initially. And you're not going to have current day information within that BI data warehouse. You're going to have prior day information only, and obviously historical information as well. All of that, back to the history of when you started using Kyriba, is all going to be there. But it's just that intraday, that real-time capability, we're not rolling that out right away because we want to make sure that we're not degrading the performance of the overall application by simply having constant calls back and forth between these two databases. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, it's because we actually built a separate database for BI so that it's simpler, easier, quicker. That's basically what these tools require. And as a result, we need to synchronize them back and forth. From a query standpoint, and I talked a little bit about this in the prior slide, it can take seconds, and I think many of you know, it can sometimes take minutes to run a report. Depends on the kind of data, it depends on what you're trying to get it from, but the amount of information is usually the reason why it might take a little bit longer. In the BI tool, it's not going to have that. You're not going to have this scenario where it takes seconds. You know, you're not going to have time to go get coffee and then your report's finished by the time you get back, because it's going to be instant. It's different way, different technology, but as a result, that's a big positive in terms of the ability to work with tremendous amounts of information if you want that in real time. The data size, so sometimes, I mean, you have all your historical data in the system, so months of historical data really looks to the, I guess we'll say, the ideal amount of information that you would be running in a report. The reason why I say that is because the moment you try and run a report for the last 5 years of cash flows, you know things are going to get bogged down pretty quick. So pragmatically, months of historical data is, for many cases, if you have a lot of information in your database, you're going to find that months is pretty much the data set you're working with or the time scale you're working with. With BI tool, it's, as I said, it's designed for big data. I know we don't really have big data in Treasury, but if you think of reports or trends or stuff you want to do over a large period of time, or if you're a client that has a tremendous amount of transactions coming in every day, that's not going to pose a problem for this, and that's a big deal why we use that. A couple of other things in terms of report creation, we're basically saying the power's in your hands. With Kyriba reports, you don't really have that. I mean, you have the ability to create filters. You can decide what data in terms of is filtered into that report, but after that, you're not really customizing the way it looks or feels. You're not changing the colors. You're not adding a graph here that would maybe tell that story a bit better. In the BI tool, the answer is yes. That's exactly what you're doing. The interactivity, the drill around, the ability to drill down, all of that stuff is a check mark as well. And then you will have this ability, not initially in phase one, that gets rolled out in a couple weeks, but over time, you will have this ability to go across modules. So our first release of the system is for cash management and forecasting. So all of your bank data, your bank transactions, balances, your cash flows, your cash forecast, all of that is rolled out in initial, which makes sense because that's what pretty much everyone on the call uses predominantly. That said, you're going to find that you will like the idea to combine information from, say, cash management and forecasting with payments, or to bank account management, or to debt or investments or foreign exchange. And you may want to have reports that touch on all of those different things. The capability is there for that system. And over the next probably about 9-10 months, like based on the next couple of releases, we will be adding that ability to have additional modules rolled into this. So as I said initially, cash management and forecasting, but by the end of the year, you're going to have almost all of those modules, and certainly into the start of next year, you're going to have everything in there in terms of every module you potentially use in Kyriba would be available through the Kyriba Business Intelligence. So I know it's a lot of information to digest with one slide, but that said, I did want to go through it quick enough that I won't even go through this one. This basically just says it's all synchronized, which I think you kind of heard that. So I'll leave that slide alone and just kind of go on this summary slide before we transition it to Greg. So to summarize the key things that we talked about, because as I said, we went through it pretty quick. We will invite your questions at the end, but hopefully just to kind of help it resonate. Number one, this is not a replacement for existing reporting. This is a complement for the existing reports. You will have different reasons and different purposes for using each, but you will find that there's a great purpose for using the business intelligence dashboards. It is one application. So although we used a third-party system, actually a system called ClickSense, it's embedded within the system. You don't need to go out to Click and actually go buy their platform. You don't need to do anything. You don't need your IT involved. It's one application. It's all part of the Kyriba Cloud. There's is a separate data warehouse that we built. Do you care about that? Most of you probably not, because it's all managed by Kyriba. But the reason why we have a little bit of difference in terms of time and why we have an automated daily data refresh rather than automated 60 times a minute data refresh is because it is a separate data warehouse. And we just want to make sure that we're not overloading the system by having a lot of calls back and forth to synchronize those databases. Over time, I'm sure we will go to intraday and maybe even more to a closer of real time. But initially, we're going to roll it out as a daily data refresh. The last point, and this is the funnest one for most of you, is that it's really easy to build. You'll have to see it to believe it, I know, but take my words for the moment as foreshadowing that it really is easy to build and share your own dashboards. There's a lot of fun you can have with them. And as a result, you also will be able to get pretty good at them because you'll want to play around a little bit and create some fun dashboards that you thought, oh, what about this? What about that? You can just do it on the fly. It's that simple. So I know, Greg, that sets you up for a lot of expectations because I'm saying a lot of simple, it's fun, all those sorts of stuff. But, let's see a demo and maybe they can believe rather than just hear me say that it's actually pretty fun to play with.
Sounds good. Let's have a look.
All right, so I am just going to share control with you. So bear with me while I do that. And Mr. Greg, you are going to be made a presenter.
That's great. Thank you, Bob. Thanks for that foundation. And hopefully on your side, you can see my screen okay before I get going.
Perfect. Yes, it looks beautiful.
Okay, great. So as Bob laid out, I'll spend the next 15 minutes or so just to give us all a foundation of the BI tool. Certainly happy to have more, say, focused or one-on-one demonstrations with myself or my team to get into some further details. But let's start. At the beginning here, as I've launched the BI tool, you'll notice I'm presenting with one of what we call monitors. Okay, so monitors really is just a view of how you align your data, your graphics, your grid views, whatever you're going to be analyzing within the BI tool. Now, when we deploy the BI tool, as Bob was mentioning, it comes standard with 9 monitors that you can start to work from. So my goal here over the next 10 or 15 minutes or so is to go through a number of these to see how we can filter the data, how we can analyze the data, how we can extract trends or insight or information that ultimately helps us make a better decision or a better response if we're preparing for a board deck or a balance sheet review meeting with our corporate controller, whomever, being able to quickly analyze that data to come to a quick understanding of what's going on within our core business. From there, I'll also go ahead and build a new one, as Bob was mentioning. They're very easy, they're very fast, and we can build a new sort of monitor from scratch. So you have that confidence and that understanding of how you can own this tool to build additional BI types of reports and dashboards within our platform. Okay, so let's get going. So I have a couple of views here. This basic foundation, cash balances, cash flow variance by percent. I'm gonna go into these in a moment, but let's cut to a maybe more pertinent or relevant view, a bit more detailed view around just measuring my cash flow. Do I have enough cash within the organization? So I'll spend a few minutes going through some of these metrics, and then as we get into other views, become a bit more clear and straightforward as I move into different topics. Okay, so the view here, first and foremost, the terms, everything you see can be completely customized. And that's a word that we hardly ever use at Kyriba. We use the word configure a lot, but here within the BI tool, you can actually change the titles. You can change even the names of the KPIs, the names of the metrics to align with your business. We'll also turn this data in a moment into more of a presentation that can be automatically downloaded into PowerPoint or to PDF. We can even insert footnotes or disclaimers around this data as well. So I'll speak about that as well. But as far as the data itself, or at least the graphics that I'm analyzing here within this first BI monitor, I can first take a look at my cash. Okay, so I can see my overall cash balance here at the top, 2.2 million, which is far off from my forecast. So I have a kind of an indicator there initially. I can also see the overall contributions to cash or disbursements from cash through a traditional waterfall view, which I'm sure many of you have used. I know when I was in Treasury, a lot of our reports, we would use that waterfall kind of component from starting balance to ending balance and the sources and uses of cash. So I can see that across all my various budget codes they have in this view. The other views I think are fairly self-explanatory, and I'm going to expose those a little bit as I get into some examples. But just forecast, as my forecast kind of aligned with what I expected year to date, based on different budget codes perhaps, or maybe by entities or companies or by banks, I can start to analyze that data more graphically and visually here through the BI tool. I think really powerful information or powerful tool, if I take a look at my company codes on the left, I may want to filter. Maybe I want to filter on company code 6, okay? And immediately, all the data refreshes. Or I may say I want to see 6, and I can hold this down and drag my mouse down and highlight 6 or 8 or however many company codes at once. What we're seeing is that the data dynamically changes. It refreshes in real time, so I can hone in on a certain company code. And or may want to filter on a certain year, so I can see the years of data I have in the system and filter on last year's activity, and the data further refreshes. So it's very fast and agile to quickly analyze a certain subset of data through the various filters. On the top, you'll notice that the filters are always very transparent and clear to me, so I can see what exactly I'm filtered on. If I like, I can remove the filters and kind of get back to the starting point. You can also filter within the tool or within the graphics itself, meaning I can see here in maybe perhaps January, I want to kind of click into January and see what happened within January. So I can filter on the month of January. Again, the data refreshes. I can see how my forecast performed for the year, for the month of January, that is. And all the KPIs across the top have also refreshed, right? So the balance was 18.87 million versus a forecast of 46.82. I'm seeing that data here, okay? The actual balances versus the forecast balances. I'm also seeing my waterfall chart update. So my opening balance, sources and use of cash to a closing balance of 18 million. I can see the variance of cash flow. I can also see here towards the bottom what's sort of driving that, what kind of activity was contributing to my forecast or contributing to my actuals for a period of time. So again, dummy or example of budget codes that we're using, but hopefully the concepts are the same for your certain business, where I can filter down and say for a certain company code or certain category, here's the activity for my capital increases or whatever my expense code were for that budget code. Okay, so very fast and dynamic to kind of get to that insight into that answer. I'm going a bit quick, but let's go into some other views. So maybe in addition to, do I have enough cash? What's the performance of my affiliates? Okay, Bob mentioned before about the views around the world, or views around, from a map perspective. We can also kind of hone in on this from a country listing here, where I can see which company codes, which regions are performing based on their forecast that they submitted through Kyriba. So again, we're storing the confirmed forecast, the actuals. We can compare that data here in the platform through the BI tool. So if we're doing some scoring or benchmarking or Treasury scorecards, I used to call it when I was in Treasury, to make sure my subsidiaries are kind of, yes, submitting the forecast, but then are they in line with what they projected as part of their monthly forecast, right? So I may want to hone in on a certain group of countries. I can filter on the screen itself, drag and kind of extend this within the view, okay? And I can see maybe from China to Canada or Argentina, kind of how that performance is going. So I can see, okay, China had a good period. I can see Hong Kong, USA as well, and filter further on the country itself. So I wanted to hone in on the States, go ahead and do so, and now I'm looking at just the activity in the US. And what you're seeing is, yes, all the the data is refreshing in real time, but I can see now by month alongside just the different subsidiaries I have in the US, and also kind of track that more from a scatter plot perspective to see by different companies or regions within the US kind of who was on target versus their forecast. Okay, so again, quick, powerful, insightful information that we're able to extract some knowledge and some insight where we didn't really know what we were looking for initially, right? We kind of knew we wanted to compare forecast to actual for a period of time. I see some outliers here in the States. I can click into the US. I can one other click, see it by my different company codes, and quickly find that trend or that information. So I think that's the difference between our traditional reporting versus the BI tool, which really exposes that intelligence, exposes that knowledge in real time here through this analysis. A few other examples, and I can build one from scratch if we have the time. So I move into my forecast is reliable. You'll notice when I did this purposely, where I didn't remove my filters. Okay, so if I set a filter and I like that filter or want to kind of continue that across the other monitors, I can do so. I will, in this case, remove these for a moment, so I can now see kind of how my forecasts are performing, or in this case, based off of more of a forecast to actual view by month or by month or different periods of time. Could be quarterly, could be annual, depending on what you want to analyze. And I can take a look of this information again by budget groups as well as by budget codes, and sort of track where were my variances for a certain period of time. So a real life example might be, I can see I had a sort of spike here that was my forecast to actual at a large variance. I can also see a trend, which we haven't spoken about as well, but we can actually have moving averages and trends now in the BI tool to kind of have that normalization or that trend line within our graphics. So let's focus on December. Okay, some kind of an outlier there in December, where my forecast was off by 23 million versus that historical average, or maybe versus a forecast. So I click into December, I can see there's the variance. Again, the various KPIs update across the top, so I can clearly see the information. And I can also see now, based on the budget groups, what was driving that variance. I can see that from a nominal perspective, meaning what from a overall US dollar equivalent was responsible for that variance, and also from a percent error perspective, right? So my capital increase view, if I just click in that budget group, I can see that as a large percent variance, and I can see now the details by clicking into the budget group. It expanded by budget code, so I can see the makeup and the build of what was contributing to that variance. But it's not a nominal, from a overall nominal amount, it really wasn't that significant. So I may want to remove that back to my prior view. Now, what I do see is CapEx was a lot higher than I expected. So I click into CapEx, and I can see of that $7.82 million miss, the various groups there that were contributing to that variance. Okay, so from a percent perspective as well as a nominal perspective. So going back to the beginning, before I even sort of knew what to look for, doing a trend perhaps, or preparing for a CFO meeting or balance sheet review meeting or board presentation, I can see various outliers from the data. I can then click into a certain view. So again, February, I can click into a view. I can see the outlier here. I can see a tax payment that was unexpected perhaps that drove that variance. And now click further to see that particular company code or tax underlying budget code that rolls into that group that was causing that particular variance. So again, information I didn't know to look for, but based on the analysis and the BI tool expose that information, I can quickly drill in and find what's going on with my business. In just a few minutes left here, I want to make a point where the information I'm showing you can also be put into proper board decks or presentations, perhaps at a minimum. So I may want a view on this percent variance of my forecast to actual. If I like this view, I can take a picture of this, right? So take a snapshot. I can call this, Greg's view, just very briefly, and I'll save that. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I can take these sort of views, these metrics, whether it's a view like this, or if I get into some other details with my, say, bank activity, where I have information across all my different bank accounts and regions, and also the detail behind the balance as well, if I want to see the detail alongside the graphics. whatever I might want to analyze, right? Maybe I'll take a view of this as well and take a picture of the balance allocation across the world, across my banks. So as I do this, what I can then do within the BI tool is integrate this into an actual presentation, into a PowerPoint or into a PDF. So that's called stories. So if I move into one of my stories, I might have a balance sheet review deck that I prepare every month, every quarter, which now you can see, to Bob's earlier point, where you can have your logo, your exact color schemes, okay, the date of the presentation, footnotes as well that can be included, and the views that I just took, right? If I want to maybe insert maybe a certain one of those views that a picture or something that we're looking at before, I can look at my pictures I just took. So that global view, I can drag that in and now have that particular graphic within my presentation. Okay, so it's based on the analysis and the views that we have in the BI tool. It's very easy to then integrate those particular windows within the BI presentations and then turn that into an actual deck or presentation here, and then add your disclaimers, your information, the details that you want to get across for your formal presentation. And this, I think, is a major enhancement, right? So we are now able to really produce executive level, senior management level presentations, right? Not just the data now, but the actual presentations from Kyriba that can then be printed and sent either, again, through a PDF. So if I drop down here, I can export this to PowerPoint. I can export that to PDF and really be able to publish this immediately from Kyriba without having to massage the data in Excel or into PowerPoint. Okay. And I think I'm a minute over, and I'll kind of close the session here just with the understanding that it's very easy to build these views. Okay. So I won't build them from scratch, but I'll just let you know here, I've built a couple already, where if I take a look at a company here, a generic company view, where we can easily put this into an edit mode, okay, as I'm looking at this now, and drag in information. So if I want to bring in, let's say I want to see a number of companies across my different legal entity structure, my banks and balances, you'll see here on the left, Kyriba, we've built now well over 400 what we call data measures that you're able then to bring that information in. So I can just drag in one of my KPIs, okay, and it says, what do you want to put in that area of your BI view here, Greg? So I can say add measure, and I can say I want to see my number of accounts, or here it is right in front of us. So I can say number of accounts, and that data is available. So it's that easy to bring data in, or if I want to bring in a chart as an example, I can maybe delete the chart I have now, and I'll bring in a new chart just so you can see that. So I'll drag the chart over. I can say, okay, what I want to chart off of, what dimension do I want to see? So maybe it's by bank. So that's done. And then what do I want to graph within that, what data do I want to see by bank? So I'll add one of those measures that I talked about. So perhaps it's cash balances. So you can see it's very fast, very easy to find the information. So I can see cash balances year to date, and I'll have that data here available. Once you have the data as well, you can change the appearance very easily. So maybe from horizontal or colors, that sort of information, and you have that view ready to go. So I can click done, and I quickly made a change to that particular view, okay? And the filtering and the concepts and everything I talked about before are immediately available. Right? So by filtering down or getting ready for a bank meeting, maybe more, Nordea is coming in, taking me to lunch for one of our bank meetings, I can filter on Nordea. I can see the activity that we have with them, the number of accounts. I can see how many payments we did with Nordea the last quarter versus other banks. So very fast and helping you to be, gets reactive to certain questions you get from the business. We're preparing ahead of time to anticipated questions that you might get, in this case, from your banker, or of course from your internal colleagues in corporate accounting or CFO or FP&A, whomever you might be interacting with. Okay. So that was pretty fast, and I try to do as much as I can there in 20 minutes, but let me take a pause here, and I know we're a few minutes over, and maybe turn it back over to you, Gretchen and Bob, to see any questions that we may have time for, or we can take those offline as well.
We are over. That's cool though, because if people want to stay on, we'll just answer questions because there's lots of them. So maybe we'll just go rapid fire, Greg, and I'll either answer it or I'll send it to you. So I'll give you one just for fun, just because you just went over this. Can BI reports, I would call them dashboards, but we'll call them reports for the purpose of the question, be scheduled and emailed, kind of like existing reports?
I don't know they can be scheduled. I can follow up on that one. The refresh happens. That's a good follow up if we can schedule that. I know that the stories and things can be refreshed, but I don't know if we can schedule that. So that's a follow up for us. Good question.
Yeah, I think the answer is no. But obviously the presentation, the ability to get into a PDF or get into a PowerPoint, Greg just showed. So that's pretty powerful right there. But it's not the exact same as like a scheduler. Like here's the 18 reports I want to send out at 9 a.m. It's not going to be quite like that because it's a different type of analysis. But in terms of distribution, it's pretty easy to do. Next question, is this similar to Tableau and Microsoft Power BI? Yeah, it is similar. We didn't choose Tableau, we looked at it. We looked at actually a variety of tools. We chose Qlik for the simple reason we thought it would be easier for you as the user to actually do what Greg just did, which is create reports, play with them, turn them around, drill around information. We just thought it was a bit more user-friendly. But we took a look at probably, I'm trying to remember what it was, Greg. It was almost like a dozen different platforms. Tableau was certainly interesting. I've liked it as well. In fact, initially I thought I'd like it the most until we actually saw Qlik, and then it was pretty obvious as to which one was going to be a little bit better for our purposes. But yeah, it's the same kind of idea, and it's embedded. So you don't have to worry about getting this tool yourself. It's already there.
That's a very good point, Bob. I'll make sure I was clear. I mean, it's embedded in your user experience. So there's a BI drop-down under tasks and reports, and you're using Kyriba, obviously, but the technology, yes, is something that we took a long look around to make sure that it was powerful and a consistent user experience that is so important to us here. But the underlying data, your budget codes, your company names, the cash flow categories, as you can see here, are all consistent with your setup, obviously. So it's a very consistent user experience. Right, so if I want to see my wires, I can click wires, and I can find all the activity as an example. It would follow your setup, your configuration that you have with your current usage of Kyriba.
Yep, absolutely, and agreed on that. Thank you. There's, oh my goodness, there's a lot of questions, all saying, when is this available, and is it something that costs money? I'm paraphrasing because that's not how it was asked, but I think that's what everyone's curious about. When is it available? It's actually just a couple weeks away. The official rollout is about a week and a half. We're going to tinker with it, and that's on our side, just to make sure everything is set up. There's a few clients that are going to test it as well, so we have a pool of clients here in North America as well as globally that are agreed to kind of play with it as a beta test. So let's just say towards the end of the month, I think it's going to be fully available. We just want to make sure that the beta testing, that the clients that agreed to do that get that early opportunity to do it, because they've been advising us all the way along. So let's just say a few weeks away at most, and we will advise all of you when that happens. In terms of cost, well, the simple answer would be yes. There is an additional cost. It's not that significant. The way it's going to be done is module by module. So if you felt you want this capability for cash, but not for investments or debt, then you would have that flexibility, which I think is a good thing. In terms of how it's going to be structured, we wanted to do a really simple model. So it's going to be a small percentage of what you pay for that particular area. So if you subscribe to cash and liquidity and you pay, whatever it is, $2,000 a month, $5,000 a month just for that piece, whatever it might be, then you're going to find it's like, I think it's 20% of that as an example. So your account managers can definitely go through that with you in terms of what it would be. But the idea is it's meant to be flexible and modular driven. So you may find that you just don't want it for everything. You only want it for certain parts of the product. Couple questions, and I'm just sort of summarizing them a little bit, but asking around the build it yourself. Are there predetermined reports created by Kyriba? The answer is yes. Actually, most of, Greg, what you went through are ones that we created already. But that said, you're not restricted to those, as Greg just showed you. You can create Greg's BI or Acme Cash Position, very creative names, Greg. And that allows you to use ones as a template and say, oh, I like an aspect of this. I'm just going to duplicate it, copy it, and then edit away. And you have that ability. In mine, I've created some that are just totally from scratch just to see if I could do it. And the answer was yes, it's not that hard. Next questions around, is the separate data warehouse also backed up in the same way? The answer is yes. It's all part of the cloud. It's all taken care of so that you have the ability to not only access it via Kyriba through your login, but also the same disaster recovery and business continuity that we're providing for the entire application is there. That means if something bad happens, it's not like you lose your dashboards. That's not going to be the case. They will always be there in the cloud for you. Other ones, I'm just scrolling through them because some of them are ones I answered already. How can you export these dashboards? I think, Greg, you did a pretty good job of that. So I will let Greg's amazing demonstration have answered that for you. Will there be additional training on how to actually do this? Yeah, there will. There's going to be a lot of different service. It just depends on what you're looking for. If you want to go, how did Greg just do that with that little lasso kind of thing? Then yeah, we're going to have documentation for that. We're going to have maybe some recorded demonstrations as well, so you can kind of see that. For most of you, that's going to be all that you need, is just enough of a, how do I start this? What are my first 60 seconds playing around this going to look like? We can record a few demos, even just ones like what Greg's doing is all recorded, but we can do a couple others, and that way you'll have that. Obviously, support can answer questions, but if you find that you want additional services, then the service team, or even some partners which are really coming on board to enable just on this area, will be there to say, yeah, we'll create brand new dashboards for you so you don't have to worry about it. It depends on what you want to do. That's going to determine what makes sense for you. But honestly, the whole idea we use this tool, the whole idea we created this way is so that you can do it yourself. You're not going to need a lot of help here. So that, as I scroll through all the questions, there's a ton of them. I think I answered either them directly or the paraphrased version of that. But if there's anything else, then please just ask away, and we will be happy to answer that. My suggestion is just talk with your account managers. If you're not absolutely sure who that person is as your account manager, then I'm sorry for that. But you have an email, KaribaClients@Kariba.com. So if you don't know whom of, say, Kat or John or Alex or Will or Alok or who within the account management team you should be working with, then just email KaribaClients@Kariba.com, and we will let you know exactly who can help you with these questions or other questions. So with that, Greg, I want to say thank you very much for a fun demo. Even while I was answering questions, you still made additional fun parts of the demo. So thank you very much for that on a great Friday. Gretchen, thank you for the introduction and the logistics. That's wonderful as always. And thank you for all of you attending. We appreciate your time and we appreciate your feedback as well. So if you want to see more like this, just ask us and we'll do more demos like this and more webinars like this. If you want to see other topics, then we will do those things as well. Thanks again and have a great weekend.